When words breach armor. The viewport of the transport shuttle revealed a sight that made Dante Reeves question every decision that had led him to this moment. The Crimson Dominion stretched across space like a metallic dragon frozen mid-flight, its hull gleaming with scarlet streaks that seemed to pulse with their own inner fire. Even from this distance, the massive dreadnought radiated an aura of barely contained violence. "First time seeing a hegemony vessel?" Captain Thorne asked from the pilot's seat, his weathered hands steady on the controls despite the slight tremor in his voice. The grizzled spacer had seen more star systems than most people saw sunrises, but even he couldn't hide his unease. "First time seeing anything like this," Dante admitted, adjusting his formal diplomatic jacket for the 100th time. The Earth Federation insignia felt heavier than usual against his chest. "How many weapons does that thing carry?" "More than you want to count, son. The Empress doesn't believe in subtle diplomacy." As their shuttle approached the docking bay, Dante reviewed his briefing materials one final time. Empress Vayara Keth, supreme ruler of the draconic hegemony, had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. Her military campaigns were legendary for their efficiency and complete lack of mercy toward those who opposed her. Trade representatives spoke of her in whispers, and even hardened mercenaries avoided hegemony space unless absolutely necessary. Yori. Shuttle settled onto the deck with a gentle thud, and Dante took a deep breath. This negotiation could secure crucial rare Earth elements for Earth's expanding colonies, but failure might mean more than just empty-handed return. It might mean not returning at all. The airlock hissed open, revealing a corridor that looked like it had been carved from obsidian and inlaid with veins of molten copper. Hegemony soldiers flanked the entrance, their armor resembling dragon scales and their weapons humming with barely restrained energy. Each stood perfectly still, but their reptilian eyes tracked every movement. Ambassador Zilok, a serpentine alien from the Coalition, slithered forward on his lower body while his torso remained upright. His forked tongue flicked nervously as he addressed Dante. "Remember, human, direct eye contact is considered a challenge. Speak only when addressed, and whatever you do, do not comment on her appearance." The last delegate who did so was fed to her pet plasma eels. Dante's throat went dry. "Right. No eye contact. No comments." "Got it." They were escorted through corridors lined with trophies from conquered worlds. Crystalline formations from the Nexus systems, metallic sculptures from the Iron Collective, and weapons from a dozen different civilizations. Everything was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The throne room doors opened with a sound like distant thunder, revealing a chamber that defied comprehension. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, lost in shadows that seemed to move with their own life. Bioluminescent vines crawled along the walls, pulsing in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat. At the far end, on a throne carved from a single massive ruby, sat the Empress. Dante's carefully rehearsed composure evaporated. Empress Vayara Keth was nothing like the brutal tyrant he'd imagined. Yes, she was imposing, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted from deep crimson to gold depending on the light. Her wings, folded behind the throne, bore intricate patterns that resembled ancient calligraphy written in silver fire. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were the color of amber stars, ancient and intelligent, holding depths that spoke of both terrible power and unexpected loneliness. "The human delegation approaches," announced Minister Gavex, a smaller dragonkin with nervous energy radiating from his movements. "Earth seeks trade agreements for rare minerals from our outer territories." Dante stepped forward, acutely aware of every eye in the chamber focused on him. The formal words he'd practiced fled his mind as the Empress leaned forward slightly, studying him with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "Your Federation sends only one representative." Her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. There was amusement there, but also something that might have been disappointment. "Your Majesty, I am authorized to negotiate on behalf of..." Dante began, then stopped. The prepared speech felt hollow and meaningless under her gaze. Instead, something honest escaped him. You're not what I expected. The chamber fell silent. Ambassador Zelok made a strangled sound that might have been a prayer to his ancestors. Minister Gavex's claws scraped against the stone floor. "Explain," the Empress commanded, her wings shifting slightly. Dante realized he was standing at the edge of a cliff, with diplomacy on one side and disaster on the other. But looking into those amber eyes, he found himself choosing honesty over protocol. "I expected a monster," he said quietly. "Someone who conquered worlds through brutality alone. But you're—" He paused, searching for words that wouldn't get him executed. "You're magnificent. Terrifying, yes, but there's intelligence in your eyes. Loneliness, too. You're not just a conqueror. You're someone who had to become one." The silence stretched so long that Dante wondered if time itself had stopped. Then something unprecedented happened. The corners of the Empress's mouth curved upward in what might have been a smile. "Interesting," she murmured. "Minister Gavex, clear the chamber. The human and I will speak privately." "Your Majesty, surely," Gavex began. "Now." The command brooked no argument. Within moments, Dante found himself alone with the most powerful being in 3 sectors of space. She rose from her throne with fluid grace, each movement precise and deliberate. As she approached, he noticed details the distance had hidden. Tiny scars along her neck scales, a slight tremor in her left wing that spoke of old injuries, the way her claws had been filed to points that could serve as weapons. "You are either very brave or very foolish," she said, stopping just close enough that he could feel the heat radiating from her scales. "Which is it, Dante Reeves of Earth?" He blinked, surprised she knew his name. "Probably both, Your Majesty. I've never been good at keeping my thoughts to myself. Most beings who speak to me with such frankness are dead within the hour." She tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "Yet you show no fear." "Oh, I'm terrified," Dante admitted with a shaky laugh. "But terror has a way of making people honest. And honestly, I think you might be tired of everyone being afraid of you." For a moment, something vulnerable flashed across her features. So brief he might have imagined it. Then her expression hardened back into imperial composure. "You assume much for a junior diplomat. Maybe. But am I wrong?" She was quiet for a long moment, amber eyes searching his face. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. "In 3 centuries of rule, no one has ever looked at me and seen anything other than death incarnate. You see loneliness. How?" "Because I recognize it," Dante said simply. "I've spent most of my life being the only human who thought diplomacy was more important than firepower. It's a lonely position even without an empire to run." Something shifted in her expression, surprise perhaps, or recognition. She extended one clawed finger and gently touched his chin, tilting his face up to meet her gaze directly. "You are under my protection," she declared, her voice carrying enough authority to reshape gravity itself. "Let it be known throughout the hegemony. Any who harm this human answer to me personally." Before Dante could process what had just happened, she turned toward the chamber doors. "Minister Gavex, prepare quarters for our guest. He will be staying aboard the Dominion for the duration of negotiations." As the doors opened and various officials flooded back in, Dante caught sight of Ambassador Zelok's expression, somewhere between amazement and terror. In the space of 10 minutes, he had either secured the most important diplomatic breakthrough in Earth's history, or doomed himself to become the galaxy's most protected prisoner. Looking up at the Empress as she resumed, her throne wings spread wide in a display of absolute authority, Dante realized he was no longer sure which scenario he preferred. Scales of devotion. 3 days aboard the Crimson Dominion had taught Dante several important lessons. First, hegemony cuisine was surprisingly delicious once you got past the fact that half of it glowed. Second, dragons apparently had an excellent sense of humor, though theirs ran toward cosmic irony rather than simple jokes. Third, and most importantly, being under the protection of Empress Vayara Keth was simultaneously the safest and most dangerous position in known space. He was contemplating this paradox while reviewing trade proposals in his luxuriously appointed quarters, when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The familiar hum of the engines shifted to a higher pitch, and through his viewport, he could see smaller vessels moving into defensive formations around the massive dreadnought. The door to his quarters chimed, and Commander Rise entered without waiting for permission. The Dragonkin warrior's scales were a deep blue-black, and her eyes held the kind of focused intensity that came from a lifetime of military service. "Human," she said without preamble, "we have a situation. The rebel coalition has intercepted our position. They're demanding we surrender you as part of their negotiations with the Empress." Dante felt his stomach drop. "Me? Why would they want—" "Because you matter to her," Rise interrupted bluntly. "And Admiral Corvin is smart enough to recognize leverage when he sees it." Before Dante could respond, the ship shuddered under weapons fire. Through the viewport, he could see a fleet of smaller vessels swarming around them like angry wasps. Each ship bore the broken chain symbol of the rebel coalition, worlds that had chosen to fight rather than submit to hegemony rule. "How bad is this?" Dante asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Rise's expression was grim. The Empress has never negotiated with rebels. Her policy has always been complete annihilation of opposition forces. But with you aboard— She trailed off, but the implication was clear. Another shudder ran through the ship, stronger this time. Dante moved to the viewport and saw something that made his breath catch. The Dominion was holding its fire. The massive dreadnought that could have vaporized the entire rebel fleet was simply absorbing their attacks. "She's not fighting back," he whispered. "No," Rise confirmed grimly. "And every moment she hesitates, more rebels arrive. At this rate, they'll have enough firepower to seriously damage even this ship." The intercom crackled to life, and Admiral Corvin's voice filled the room, gravelly and worn like a man who had seen too many battles. "Empress Vyara Keth, I know you can hear me. Our terms are simple. Surrender the human diplomat, and we withdraw. Refuse, and we take him by force along with whatever's left of your precious ship." Dante closed his eyes, understanding flooding through him. This was his fault. His presence had created a weakness in the most powerful military force in the galaxy. The Empress, who had never shown mercy, was paralyzed by the need to protect one unremarkable human. "I have to go," he said quietly. "What?" Rise spun toward him. "If I surrender myself, they'll let the ship go. It's the logical choice. The Empress would incinerate me where I stand if I allowed that," Rise said flatly. "You're under her protection. That means something." Before Dante could argue, the door opened again, and Dr. Nix Talon hurried in. The scientist was one of the few non-dragon species in the hegemony's inner circle, a humanoid with silvery skin and large compound eyes that missed nothing. "I may have a solution," Nix announced without preamble. "But it requires the human to take a considerable risk." "I'm listening," Dante said immediately. "The rebels want you because they believe you represent the Empress's weakness. But what if you could become her strength instead?" Nix pulled out a small device that looked like a communication headset. "This will allow you to broadcast directly to all ships in the area. If you can convince the rebels that negotiation serves their interests better than warfare, you want me to mediate between dragons and rebels while sitting in the middle of a space battle," Dante said slowly. "That's insane." "Completely," Nix agreed cheerfully. "But you've already proven you can see past the Empress's reputation to the person beneath. Perhaps you can do the same for her enemies." Another impact shook the ship, and Dante made his decision. "Set it up." 10 minutes later, he was standing on the bridge of the Dominion, surrounded by Dragonkin officers whose expressions ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. At the center of it all stood Empress Vyara, magnificent and terrible in her full regalia. Her scales had darkened to deep crimson, almost black at the edges, a sign of barely contained rage. "You should not be here," she said without looking at him. "Return to your quarters. I will handle this." "By destroying them all?" Dante asked quietly. "That's not handling it, that's postponing it." More rebels will come and eventually someone will get lucky. She turned to face him, amber eyes blazing. They threaten what is mine. The penalty for that is death. What if there was another way? There is no other way. I am what I am, Dante. A conqueror, a destroyer. That is how peace is maintained. Dante activated the communication device, feeling the weight of every gaze on the bridge. Admiral Corvin, this is Dante Reeves. I'm speaking to you directly. The human speaks, came the gravelly reply. Have you come to surrender yourself? No, I've come to offer something better. A real negotiation. Silence filled the comm channel. Then Corvin's laugh, bitter and harsh. Negotiate with the Crimson Empress? She doesn't negotiate, boy, she conquers. You're right, Dante said, glancing at Vayara. She has conquered. But look around you, Admiral. How many of your people are dead? How many more will die if this continues? You're fighting her because you refuse to submit. But what if submission isn't what she's offering anymore? Explain. Dante took a deep breath, knowing he was about to either save everyone or doom them all. The Empress is offering something unprecedented, a seat at the table, not as conquered subjects but as partners in a new kind of alliance, one based on mutual benefit rather than domination. The bridge erupted in startled murmurs. Several officers looked like they wanted to arrest him on the spot, but Vayara remained silent, watching him with an unreadable expression. You speak for the Empress? Corvin's voice was skeptical but intrigued. I speak for the possibility of change, Dante replied. The galaxy is full of threats none of us can face alone. The void wraiths from beyond the galactic rim, the machine consensus spreading through the outer territories. We can keep fighting each other while existential threats gather, or we can find a better way forward. And you believe the Crimson Empress would honor such an arrangement? Dante looked directly at Vayara as he answered, I believe she's tired of being feared and ready to be respected instead. I believe she's learned that strength isn't just about the ability to destroy. It's about the wisdom to know when not to. For a long moment, silence filled the bridge. Then Vayara stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly over the comm. Admiral, Corvin, you have fought bravely against forces that should have annihilated you. That speaks to both your courage and your people's desperation. I offer you this safe passage to the neutral station at Kepler's Junction, where we will discuss terms of a ceasefire and potential alliance. Come in good faith, and you will leave in safety, regardless of what we decide. The silence stretched longer this time. When Corvin finally spoke, his voice held a note of wonder. The Crimson Empress offers negotiation instead of annihilation. Either you've gone soft, Your Majesty, or that human of yours has worked some kind of miracle. Vayara's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. Perhaps both, Admiral. 3 hours later, Dante stood on the observation deck, watching the rebel fleet form up alongside hegemony vessels for the journey to Kepler's Junction. It was a sight no one had thought possible. Natural enemies flying in formation, united by the possibility of something better than endless war. Soft footsteps behind him announced Vayara's arrival. She moved to stand beside him at the viewport, her presence warm and solid in the dim light. You took an enormous risk, she said quietly. If Corvin had refused, if his people had demanded blood. But they didn't, Dante replied. Sometimes people surprise you. Even enemies can choose hope over hatred if you give them the chance. She was quiet for a long moment, amber eyes reflecting the distant stars. 3 centuries of rule, and no one ever suggested that showing mercy might be a form of strength. Maybe no one ever saw you clearly enough to suggest it. She turned to look at him, and in her gaze he saw something that made his heart skip. Vulnerability. Yes, but also trust. Real trust, perhaps, for the first time in her long life. When this is over, she said, when we've established this impossible alliance you've envisioned, what then? Will you return to Earth with your mission accomplished? Dante considered the question, looking out at the mixed fleet sailing toward an uncertain but hopeful future. When he spoke, his voice was steady and sure. I think my mission has changed, he said. I came here to negotiate a trade agreement. Instead, I found something much more valuable. A way to turn the galaxy's most feared conqueror into its greatest protector. And I found someone who sees me as more than just another face in the crowd. Vayara's hand found his, her claws carefully, positioned to avoid injury. The loneliness you recognized in me, does it still trouble you? Dante smiled, intertwining their fingers despite the difference in size. Not anymore. Turns out the cure for loneliness isn't being feared by everyone. It's being understood by someone. As their ships sailed toward Kepler's junction and the delicate work of building peace from the ashes of war, Dante reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. He had come to space as Earth's most junior diplomat and somehow become the bridge between worlds. More importantly, he had found in the Crimson Empress not the monster of legend but Vayara, a woman who had forgotten how to be anything other than what her empire needed, until someone reminded her that sometimes what an empire needs most is a ruler willing to choose understanding over force. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but bright with possibility, and for the first time in either of their lives, neither of them would face it alone.